thank you to the Mark Twain Library, and thank you guys for being here in live, and for all you out there at your homes, which is nice as well. I think that's one of the greatest things that happened out of the pandemic, is that we learned that we can do things hybrid. And that's a really great thing. But also for me, it's the ability to have these talks recorded. And then that's a big thing, because in the past, it was only the people that were here that really got to enjoy it. So now anyone can enjoy what we're talking about. So what we're talking about tonight is Twins, Connecticut. There's more than you think. This is something that Susan Boone-Durkee, myself, and Heather Morgan really came into during the centennial of Mark Twain here in Redding. As a historian, you don't get too many 100-year anniversaries to celebrate. You pretty much get one, because, And we got a really nice 3, if not 4 or 5, if you really think about it. So you had Mark Twain's arrival in Connecticut, that kind of spurred it. Then we had the creation of the library, the initial one, as well as this one. And then you had Mark Twain's passing, but on top of that, you had Claire's wedding, and then Nina, which is his grandchild's birth here in Redding, on top of a lot of other things. So it was a really interesting time to be a historian, but it was wonderful because we got to explore it all. And in the process of trying to share it with the outside world, we came across other things. And one of the other things I'll start with tonight was this. This was looking for Lincoln. So in the process of our centennial, Illinois was doing their own thing. So this is brochures from 2009. And they created a program, and they had a guide map and a pullout, and all these things that you could find about Lincoln's time in Illinois. And so we kind of said, whoa, well, what do we got? So that's really what this program is about, is this. And thankfully I have friends that live in Chicago, so they were able to send me this. And I literally just found this 3 weeks ago, and I was so thrilled because everyone that's here in person afterwards, if they want to thumb through it and look at it, it's a really neat concept. So that's the whole purpose of tonight. And I'll start with, after the fact, I always wondered how that worked out for that state. Was it successful? Was it not? Did they make any money? And this just came out May 7th. And it's a report on how they're doing in terms of tourism overall. And Illinois is a lot bigger than us. I mean, I think they're 58,000 square miles, and they focus on them. But they've seen a really big increase in international visitors to the state that have increased 40%, but they're also getting billions of dollars into their own economy, which is 47% increase, and that's impressive. And it makes sense because you have a really major city, Chicago, and a major airport as well. So what I noted up top here was that's Chicago. This is the region that is basically the hub of the activity for the land of Lincoln. That's how they all their literature is the land of Lincoln. So all through here is the land of Lincoln, but you can see as a whole, this is the state. And between Springfield and, say, Charleston, that's about an hour and 40 minutes. But it's about from Chicago to here, 3 hours. So it's like us driving to Vermont. So that was something that I just found interesting, but this is the hub. And all through here is basically all in this book, and a lot of what the book will tell the visitors is how long it takes to get to one place to the other. The other neat thing that they have in this state is Route 66, and that's a big draw. So as far as we go, we're smaller, we're 10% smaller, but we have connections all over the state, literally. And then you land in an international airport up here at Windsor Locks, Bradley, and you're right in the hub of the heart of Twain Country. So, and then once you get into Twain Country, you're about an hour from any location you want to go on a map. So in this, you see all the stars of all the different locations. I can't go over all of them tonight with you because we'd be here for 3 hours, and that's not good. But I will point out some really neat connections for you tonight, and we'll start with the goals. So the goals overall for a project like this, which would be tourism themed on Twain in Connecticut, would be to make us a destination for Twain sites, but also research, because we do have a lot of research sites all over the state. And then just a simple way to promote pride in where you live through Twain, because everywhere you live that has Twain, you're like, wow. Like I was at a soccer game with my daughter in Unionville, which is a part of Farmington. And I was telling the individual there, like, well, you know, we don't have much history there. I'm like, yes, you do. You have the Andrew Carnegie Library. And do you know Mark Twain bought his paper from a company in Unionville? He's like, no. And, you know, you know, so the paper factory at Unionville, like, produced paper of not only high quality, but for everybody, manuscripts, books, diplomas, federal papers, you name it. And it was really high quality stuff. So when people find out about it, they get really proud about it. And pride in place is something that I've always promoted across my career. And it's simple. And Susan knows it, and I know it because we did it. It's all about connecting people to the history and just helping out just a little bit. So we stayed local, and we did most of this in 2010. And as I've noted, like, you know, when you do stuff for free, you catch some heck at home, right there. And so we stayed local. We went to Easton, Redding here, Ridgefield, and Wilton. And we kept it pretty simple. Wilton did a really nice job, really stepping up. But Susan did us a nice little piece as promotion in Ridgefield. We did this at their town hall on the lower level. It was fun. It was simple. You know, we basically brought them something that connected them to their town. I'll get into that a little bit later. But also a little bit about Mark Twain's time here in Redding. So I'll point out this one here, there, in a second because I got a bigger photo of it. But this was as simple as it was. It was just a nice little safe enclosure that allowed us to share with people Mark Twain's time here, but also a connection with their town. Wilton went big, and this was a lot of fun because they brought in Hartford as well. And they converted their entire museum to Mark Twain. So just like we have on our walls here at the library, they did on their walls. So it was Wilton's neighbor, Mark Twain, and from top to bottom, this was on the bottom floor. They did great exhibits, and it was a really amazing experience. And within that, we did share Twain's Connecticut with them. Like I said, this is one of my favorites. So when Twain moves to Stormfield, which is just over your head on top of the hill, he taxes the non-valuable sex, us. So you get taxed for your luggage as a male every time you come, and that is a donation that leads to the Mark Twain Library's building. So this is actually a tally of what all the people paid, but also what they donated. And this was a big hit everywhere that we showed it. So it's just a fun archive to have. This is what we did in Easton. This was great as, you know, growing up here, Easton, Redding, we share Joe Barlow High School. Kids have Helen Keller Middle School. They're not quite sure why. Well, this in the library, we were able to show them exactly why, and then really get excited about the relationship between Mark Twain and Helen Keller, because it's really a special relationship. Like, they really were true friends from the very beginning. You know, the picture up here is when he first met her, when she was going after her education at Radcliffe. And then you get into like her visitation of Stormfield right here. And this is the guest book. Oops, my bad, back here. And overall, it was very well received. within their public library, and we had a lot of fun with it. And Bruce Nelson isn't here now, but he's done a great job to continue that theme in Easton. Coming off a cold, so I'm going to take a little bit of a drink here. Okay, but we have other places, as I said. So that's what we'll get into and show you. See, I should probably just stick with this thing. I'm old school. So connections all over the state. Fairfield County is big within it, as well as Hartford, but you get little bits and pieces all across the state, including along the corridor of the Long Island Sound. So it's something that really is something that the whole state could really benefit from. We could go bigger, of course, take a little funding, but have an annual Twain convention. They have a nice convention center in Hartford. Susan and I know people. This library knows people. You would be amazed at the Twain scholars that have come through our town. And it's a special connection when you are a Twain-iac. Twain plus maniac is a Twainiac, and many of us are. And we met many of them when we were in the centennial year, because they all wanted to see where he lived. And that was a great thing for them, because ownership has changed at Stormfield currently. Obviously it's not the same house, but the basement is the same foundation as it was when he was here. You'd be amazed at how many people wanted to crawl and did crawl around that basement looking for certain things. So it was an important thing, but we met great people. Robert Hurst of the Mark Twain papers came here, gave a great talk. Obviously the papers created not just one, but 3 of these. Imagine your life in 3 of these volumes. My life would probably be like about that. But Robert Hurst came here to talk about this, and what was neat about it is that we got a chance to personally talk to him. And it was one of the funniest conversations I've had with a Twain scholar. We sat down below, and we just, we had done a little tour of Twain's Redding, and he just sits down and he says, "So how'd you get sucked in?" And I was like, "That's pretty funny." I said, "Well, Ken Burns documentary, I had a website, people want to know more about Twain's time here because they didn't really realize that he lived here until Ken Burns did that." And I said, "So that was pretty much something that I got into in terms of research." I said, "So how did you get sucked in?" And he said, "I failed German." So I was like, that's pretty funny, because Twain had some really funny things to say about the German language. The words are like this long. But also, I said, "But I'm confused." So he said, "Well, I was going to Berkeley, grad student. I needed to pick up some extra hours as a student, and this Mark Twain Papers project comes up. So I need the credits," and I got in, and lo and behold, that's back in the late 60s. Now he runs the whole show of the Mark Twain Papers. He's the guy. So Twain sucks you in and captures you. We know that. And it's just because his life is so interesting and so rare. So my thought was that you could easily have a Twain convention yearly. We'd bring in all the big ones from Hartford, Elmira, Buffalo, you name it. They'd come. They've already come. And then, anyone who wants to be a part of it, libraries, museums, town halls, they could always tap in as well. And the other thing that, they did so well in Illinois was that they tapped into the international traveler. Well, we got Bradley. Set up a sample space that just kind of as people come in to Bradley, they see Mark Twain and they say, "Oh, what's that all about?" It's just a great way to capture the incoming crowds and tell them where to go. So once you get their interest, just tell them where they can go. And the whole Hartford area is full of places where they can go. So it's a good capture. And then obviously just the no-brainers, put it on the train stations, put it in the trains, put it on the buses, put it on the highway stops, just let people know where they can go to see what's special about Twain in Connecticut. So here's the sample of 56. I didn't do 56. I did a capture, and Maggie told me to keep this within 45 minutes, so I practiced this, so I know what I'm doing. So Stanford is one that's special. That's where my mom was born, so that's good. Quintard, Edward Quintard, was his physician, not only his, but the entire family. He was with the family the entire time, Mark Twain himself, until his final moment of death. So he's a big connection. This is the two of them at Stormfield. This one's really neat. So Captain Mitchell, Henry Ferguson, and Samuel Ferguson. So Henry and Samuel Ferguson are from Stanford. So Samuel here was suffering from tuberculosis, and the family thought that him getting on a ship and doing a tour of the Pacific would help with the disease. So they're on a ship called the Hornet. The captain is Captain Mitchell. Things go wrong. They didn't have flashlights back then, so someone looking for something with an open light comes across an area with varnish. The vapors ignite a fire. The ship goes on fire. Everyone just basically takes whatever they can get off the ship, jumps into 3 makeshift vessels to get off the ship and, rescue really vessels. And 43 days later, half of them show up in Hawaii. So this was the source of one of Mark Twain's, if not greatest, first literary productions. And he said that in hindsight it was. He talks about, people always talk about the jumping frog, but he said the story of the Hornet, which started off as 43 days on an open boat, was really what really launched his literary career. And that's a part of the first edition, volume 1 of his autobiography, and you'll find it on 127. That's where it starts. So basically, these individuals are the survivors. They make it to Hawaii. Mark Twain happens to be there. You remember he did a lot of, maybe I don't remember because we do, but he's doing a big collective on, they called them the Sandwich Islands back in that time frame. So he was going to do a big article and a lecture tour on the Sandwich Islands. So he hears about this. He's not well himself, but he knows that it's an important topic. So he gets to them, he talks to them, and eventually Mark Twain and these individuals get on a boat to get back to California. And because they had kept diaries, and because of these conversations, that becomes the story. And as you can imagine, back in that time frame, that story is very popular across the country. And you have guys in the middle of the Pacific with compasses and maps of the stars that miraculously make it 4,000 miles to Hawaii and survive. So that was a big thing in his life, and that was published in 1866 and then redone 30 years later. P.T. Barnum, he's a fun one. So P.T. Barnum is a product of both Bethel as well as Bridgeport. He actually was the Bridgeport mayor at one time. He obviously had a great circus, and for the most part, between 1870 and the 1890s, they're pen pals, and they poke fun at each other. But 1875, Twain, Sam, and Livy actually visit Barnum and his wife in Bridgeport at his mansion. So they were true friends, and then their paths kind of passed. But the Mark Twain papers, you can look up all the different letters and search by name, and it was really, they were funny pen pals, basically, after that moment. But after visiting Barnum in Bridgeport, then he came up to Hartford soon after in 1875 and had a lecture up there. And people that were reviewing his lecture said that if Mark Twain is the #1 lecturer in Hartford, he could soon be the #2. So he's very, very talented, and he, I think he at one time jokingly questioned that, it shouldn't be a sucker is born every minute. It should be that the American people enjoy a good humbug. Just across the line, Danbury, William and his son Philip, the Sunderlands, they not only built his Redding home, they built most every historically significant building in Danbury. And they were a big part of this area. Philip would be interviewed in, 1958 about his experience at Mark Twain, building his house, and so it's one of the most unique houses that he's ever built. And because if you think about it, yeah, they're in the city, but out here, Mark Twain's house was so much different than any other house. You had running water, you had lights, electricity, all the things that no one really had here. They always talk about the farmers of the area looking up at the hill and the lights and just marveling at it, because we really didn't have many houses with lights. It was run off of coal. The Grand Church in Georgetown had it, and maybe someone on Sunset Hill had it, but that was about it. So it was a very modern house. He had $2,000, which probably what sort of cost, 1,000-gallon tanks of water that fed water from a reservoir on the property into the house. So it must have been a very interesting construction for them because it was so unique, and I'm sure that was one of the first things that they had encountered there. But John Mead Howells was the architect, and after that project, they did a lot of work with him. And he was William Dean Howells, a friend of Twain's son. So it was a really good marriage there. Ridgefield is really neat. Ridgefield, we touched on Cass Gilbert. A lot of the connectivity with Cass Gilbert, which is Keeler Tavern, is the fact that they were both members of the Players Club. That was the club down in New York City. Cass Gilbert was a great architect. He did the Woolsworth Building and a lot of other things. But they were friends, and Edward Knox is a neat one as well. This is his house in Ridgefield. It was on Florida Hill. Just like Twain, like 300-acre property now, a lot of residential spaces. But his family was pretty much, I think they started in the late 1830s. They made the top hats. So all 23 presidents wore their hats, including Abraham Lincoln. The connections to Lincoln that I found is insane to this. I didn't expect to find. So they made the stovepipe hat of Lincoln's. That was his family. They did very well. Obviously, his house was quite extravagant. I mean, even if Mark Twain visited there a number of times, you can obviously see why. And then Edward Windsor Kimball was the illustrator of Huckleberry Finn, a very well-known illustrator. So between him and Dan Beard, in Redding here, a lot of the early books got done. So Ridgefield's got a really neat connection. But I like this one the best because I didn't realize how many presidents wore his hat, and then the connection to Abraham Lincoln. I guess he wanted the hat larger because he would store important documents in the hat. Something I didn't know. This one's neat too. So Captain Stormfield, Captain Anybody. This is the captain. So Ned Wakeman is the prototype of any captain in Mark Twain's books. He wrote, "I'd rather travel with that portly, hearty, jolly, boisterous, good-natured sailor than any other man I've ever come across." And so he lived in Saugatuck. And I thought that was a really neat connection. Because ship captains are a big part of his books. This one, obviously my favorite. So this is when Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan Macy and John Macy come to Stormfield. This is their arrival day. They came here in January of 1909, and as I said, they've been close friends since she was a teenager. I have a couple slides here for that. This is the guest book. So the guest book is great, and if you haven't found it yet, the New York Times came here, and they scanned all of our books and our documents. So the guest book is scanned. So every page of the guest book is scanned by the New York Times. You can go online and read who visited on what day. So this is her entry after she's about to leave. This is around January 11th of 1909. She says, I've been in Eden 3 days and I saw a king. I knew he was a king the minute I touched him, though I had never touched a king before. Daughter of Eve, Helen Keller. And then this is his response, because he read to her and her entourage the Diary of Eve the night before. And it was a pretty powerful experience. So he understands exactly what she's talking about. And it really points to the fact that I think she loved to be with him because he treated her just like a human being, like any other human being. He didn't white glove it. He really had fun with her. There's a couple things from Isabel Lyon's diaries where he tells her, come on in, we'll play some billiards together. And she's, oh, Mr. Twain, I can't play billiards, I'm blind. And he tells her, we can't play any better than my friends. So it was and then this one too. In speaking of her, he says that blindness is an exciting business. I tell you, if you don't believe it, get up some night on the dark, wrong side of your bed when the house is on fire and try to find the door. So these are the things that she enjoyed about being with him. He made her feel just like anyone else. This is her in Easton, so she'd eventually come to live in Easton. It's a great connection. That's why you have Helen Keller Middle School in Easton. And she was involved in the American Foundation for the Blind. So that's the connection. So the individual that owned the properties, this is in the Aspetuck region of Easton along the Westport Road. That's why sometimes you'll see correspondence from Westport. They use the post office there. But what I really love is that this is what was created for her. So she's not walking with a stick or a guide dog. These posts are what she uses to get around the property. And if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of great videos that show her actually walking and enjoying the outside world. This one we got from the American Foundation from the Blind with her dog, and this is her in the 50s. It's just a really neat picture of her. And her and Twain's lives were so similar, and he traveled 35 countries, she got to 37. But it's really neat that they found roots here at the very end of their lives. She obviously got to stay in Easton for much longer than he stayed in Redding. But it's a neat connection, and that's why I'm kind of happy that we have the connection with the high school and the middle school. It's and we're trying to get more people to know about it. This one's another great one. So this individual, Warner, again, he was a student that Mark Twain anonymously donated to. He was a Yale student, a very promising law student, and Twain met him at was something called the Kent Club, which I like because I looked up here again. But it was the Kent Club, and he was really like, this kid is something special. So he wanted to fund basically his room and board, so his lodging and his food, but he wanted to do it anonymously, and as it turns out, he did very well because it was decades or so after Warner passed that people found out about it. So basically, he went on to become a great lawyer, NAACP in the Baltimore area, and Thurgood Marshall would become the Supreme Court judge. He mentored him. So I think that's kind of points to what Twain and even Livy, his wife, did over the course of their lives. And we won't go into that later, but I thought this was a neat connection to that. Twain grew up in slavery. You know, he grew to understand the evils of it, and that's why he had Huckleberry Finn. Like, he would hang out with the slaves when he was a kid, and he understood that. But as he got older and understood what was wrong with that, then he did corrections like this, which I think is neat. Beinecke, if you haven't gone through their articles online or been there, Yale connection, but this is a great building with great collections of Twain. Most of the Twain connections that I found came through this vehicle. So it's a really well done, rare manuscript, and there's photos and there's everything else. But that's another nice connection to the New Haven area. And this one's cool, like Gillette Castle. So Will Gillette grew up in the neighborhood of Mark Twain, the Nook Farm area. And as, you know, a younger kid was popular in the neighborhood. And so Twain wrote the Gilded Age, and then they tried to do a play called the Colonel Sellers play. And Will was a part of that. And Livy and Sam liked it so much that they decided that this kid's something else. So they donated the $3,000 they needed to continue his education in the arts. And that obviously turns out well because Sherlock Holmes and everything else he did. But as Susan and I were kind of talking offline about, Gillette is known as pretty much imitating Mark Twain correctly, like better than anyone else. And that makes sense because it was over there. But Gillette Castle is a state park. And so it's got a neat connection. You know, who knew? This one's another special one. They were best friends. Joseph Hopkins Twitchell was really the reason why Mark Twain was able to win the hand of Livy, because Livy was very religious, Mark Twain not so much. And so as they're courting, or he's trying to court, he strikes up a friendship with Joseph. And in all of his correspondence, he's kind of just telling Livy, I met this nice reverend, I'm going to church with them, we're talking this, and she starts to kind of warm up to it. And from there, their friendship would flourish, and it became a very tight, significant part of the family as a whole. I like it. My wife was born in Southington, so I can tell her that we have a connection there. But also, as far as their life, I mean, he was the clergyman for their marriage, even Clara's wedding here in Redding, and even the dark periods, when Susie passed, and Livy and Jean, and even himself, he was always there. And for us here in Redding, I just drove by it on Upwalk Hill. His daughter was Harmony Twitchell, and she married Charles Ives. So we have a neat connection to the family as well. Steve Courtney of the Mark Twain House and Museum has done a great job with his talks and books upon their relationship. This one's neat as well. Hartford area, Windsor. So Elijah Bliss Jr. of the American Publishing Company. Pretty much the reason why Twain makes the trek from Buffalo down to Hartford, and he would be his publisher for a good period of time. So that's a nice connection with the business side of things. And this one's another neat one. Old Saybrook. Fenwick Hall was the hotel where they stayed, and where some believe that he began writing Tom Sawyer. So this kind of follows you along the Long Island Sound corridor. Waterbury, Connecticut. So this one's fun. So on May 21st, 1901, he gets a letter to the Waterbury Watch Company. Please send me a watch, $1 enclosed. And so I guess the company, to promote themselves, has this watch that makes the dollar famous. So that was what he got. And in some of his publications, he writes about Hartford Waterbury watches as well. Stonington and Manchester. So in Stonington, there was John Hammond Trumbull, and he had a Hartford Monday evening club, and I think that was over in the Cheney Mansion. And so to get Mark Twain involved, it kind of just puts this, wasn't a formal letter, it was an informal letter just to invite him to join them. And Twain gets back to him and says, that was a great move, because, if you send me a formal letter, I probably wouldn't, have been a part of that. And so, yeah, he starts, his first meeting is in February, and he learns of the clergyman Nathaniel Burton's essay, Individualism, and people that would be there for Twain's talks thought that he brought a lot to the group. But that was a very important group in that time period. East Granby, Roswell Phelps, so he's a former school teacher, and he is recruited by James Osgood to assist Twain on his tour of the Mississippi River, and those dictations would lead to Life on the Mississippi, which is one of his more popular books. And then for Phelps, he would go on to become a Hartford Insurance Company stenographer. So another business connection in that one. This one's kind of interesting, the Fort Trumbull. So A Curious Experience, which is something he wrote in 1881, begins with, in the winter of 1692, I was commandant of Fort Trumbull. And what's nice about this one is actually, that's a state park as well, and they've taken ownership of that. So they actually have an exhibit that brings this forth. So when you tie in state parks, that's always an important thing. This one's special, obviously. I never thought there'd be a connection to Sharon, Connecticut, which is where I'm from. But Frank J. Sprague is here, and Harriet, his wife, is here. So Harriet did visit Stormfield, and she was friends with Mark Twain. No one knows Frank J. Sprague, but he was basically the father of modern electric traction. He came up with AC/DC. Yeah. And trolleys, traction, trolleys, electric trains, Otis Elevator. He sold his technology to them. So he came up with a lot of technology that you never would know about, but that's just how he operated. He was more about the inventing than he was about anything else. So that's his house in Sharon. It still exists. It looks the same. There's still plenty of maples in front. But yeah, look up Frank J. Sprague and his career. It's pretty impressive. He was a Navy man, grew up in Milford, and pretty impressive career. So this ties to him because when Clara got married, no one had a camera. So that was in October of 1909. But who had a camera? Frank J. Sprague. So the only photograph we've seen of the wedding is that one, and that's why it's here. So there wouldn't have been a wedding photo without Frank J. Sprague. So that's a fun connection for me. I have one. So this we came across when we were looking at archives with other historians. So that's my great grandfather John Colley, and that's Samuel L. Clemens, and that's his value, and that's our value. But it was a fun find. It's just those things that make you laugh. And so, why are there so many connections? Well, his time in Connecticut is significant, obviously, and a lot of the most important times in his life were spent here. Believe it or not, of all the places he traveled and all the places he lived, Hartford and Redding are the only places that were custom built for either him or the family. And what I love about us and them is that they now have a Scottish mantle. And guess where it was? It was here. And guess who gave it to them? Us. The Banks family visited the Hartford house in the 50s when they were getting it to where it is today. And he said, what was there? It was a blank wall. He said, oh, it was like a Scottish mantle or something. And he goes, what did it look like? They described it. He said, it's in my barn. I said, no way. What? And it was. So just up the hill here, where you just, as you pass the waterfall, that house on the right there, in the barn, was the Scottish mantle. So it's a neat connection. So obviously Connecticut in his life from 1871 to 1885 is a whirlwind of success, and obviously you can go to the Hartford house today. I definitely, you should go if you haven't gone. If you go in the day, then go at night because it's so much different. Going at night is really fun because they kind of like down the lights just like the gas lights. It's definitely a different experience. Every time I go there, and I go there a lot, sorry, it's great. This is the family on the porch, all the girls, Twain and Libby. One of the few pictures I have seen of him without a cigar in his hand, but his arm's kind of going behind his back, so I guess it's back there. And obviously that's why the Hartford region is thick with his. But here, I mean, he dictated a lot of articles and essays and books, and a lot of that would be suppressed until after his death. That includes his autobiography, and that obviously was by design. But Redding is a lot more significant than I personally even imagined in his lifetime. Again, this house, something that was custom built, as modern as it could be. Here's the back side. I love this part here because that was called Clara's cage. That was a custom built little area for her to enjoy the outdoors without the bugs. And I think the most important thing for him as a person was that many of his close friends would visit. So William Dean Howells, I mean, people have said that these two really changed American literature as a team. And, for William Dean, probably the pride of seeing the product of his son's work as he designed it. But they were very close friends. They met in their 30s, and that relationship would go into the very end. I like this one. Again, another connection to Abraham Lincoln. Just over the line, you had Ida Chargle from Easton. She was the journalist who inspired term muckraking. She went after Standard Oil, and I'm amazed that he invited her there because his buddy Henry Rogers, she was kind of lighting him up in that. But she visits in August of 1908, and he has at least one book of works, a 2-volume set, The Life of Abraham Lincoln. These connections to Lincoln really blew me away in this process. But also you see Colonel Harvey, who was another part of the puzzle piece with Helen Keller. So, like I said, the New York Times has done a nice job of scanning our stuff. So going through the guest book and seeing who visited and when is a really fun activity. The other thing that we should recognize more is that this library is the only library in the entire world that he actually funds and fills with books, and he dedicates it to his daughter Jean. So we're in the Jean L. Clemens section now, but he funds it and he supplies it, and he really empowers people to really make it happen. This is the chapel. I drove across Umpqua today. I was very happy. 154 Umpqua Road, just before you get to Diamond Hill. They cleared it. This is the first library. This section you can now see very well because they've done all the nice yard work. So 154 Umpqua Road. This chapel overlooked the Umpqua Cemetery, but this is what he would initially, in 1909 or 8, fill with books. So this was our first library before this one was built, and that was after his death. So it's neat to be able to see it in the present day. This is what our building, so this is like right out here. As I love the fact that you see the stone walls in front and how rustic it is, and you can see the little houses below there from the Lounsbury property. So this is what the original Mark Twain Library looked like just after 1911. And this is where we're sitting today. So this here is that there. So it's a really great little space here, this library. So again, the importance of Redding. The only marriage take place in the immediate family was Clara. Nina, that's his granddaughter. That's Nina. She was born in August of 1910. You can see the poor girl got his nose. But that was an important thing. He always wanted a grandchild, and I think some believe that the last conversation that he had with Clara was about that. And then obviously he dies here, and that gives us another connection to Boughton and Sons Funeral Home. They were the ones that prepared him for burial in New York. So that's Mark Twain's Connecticut on a small scale. But as you can see, there's more than you think, and anyone who's interested, anyone here, or anyone in the outside world, I made it simple. I set up Twain's Connecticut at Gmail account, so people can email, and I'll know that the email is just about that. And I'm willing to partner with anybody on it, and including the state of Connecticut. I'll get in touch with them now. But like I said, having the Mark Twain Library be able to have this with you guys here and them out there, but also record it is big, because now I can make it move forward. So Bruce isn't here, so someone else is going to have to drink whiskey. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I'm open to any questions you may have or any thoughts.